joining us here on the Rich Eisen Show, a man who spent 11 seasons with the Philadelphia Eagles. Wow, 11. From 2006 to 2016 in his 14 seasons in the NFL as a long snapper. And now he is not only one of the best magicians out there on the market and entertainers, but he's now an author called Life is Magic, My Inspiring Journey from Tragedy to Self-Discovery. John Dorenbos, great to see you, John.
I love it. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming.
This is Rockstar, man.
Anytime. Let's talk a little football first.
Yeah, hit me.
We'll talk about your book. The Eagles right now appear to be a little bit lost at 5-6, but there was no Lane Johnson yesterday, no Jordan Howard, a whole host of wide receivers. What do you think is going on with Wentz and the coaching staff and everything going on in Philadelphia right now? Best you can tell, John.
I think they're banged up, and when you have injuries, it's tough. And then when you start putting guys in and out of position, it's hard. So, you also look at what Carson's doing. How Carson's banged up. I mean, the guy's unbelievable. And when I was in Philly, I was thinking about retiring. I didn't really know where I wanted to go. And then they offered me a 3-year extension. And I remember sitting back saying, okay, if I got a shot, it's with Carson. The guy's got all the intangibles. He's got the height. He's got the strength. He's got the discipline. He's got the smarts. They just got to bring it all together. They just got to chill out, relax. And to me, this is what it is. Ignore the outside world. Just chill out, go back to what you do, and keep it simple. To me, simple game plans win. Like when we would go Sunday to Thursday,
right? We
were like with Andy Reid, we would destroy people on those Thursday games because everything was simple. Just let guys go one-on-one and win the battle.
Yeah, I mean, and one of their best wins this year was that early game at Green Bay.
There you go.
The early week game at Green Bay. I mean, that is basically their crown jewel of a win that they've had so far this year.
Against Green Bay, come on.
I know.
And in my opinion, Green Bay is good every year. You got Aaron Rodgers, man, you're good.
Well, they're at Miami next, and then they're home for the Giants on a Monday night. Then they're at Washington. So if you give them those teams together have 6 wins. So if you give them 3 wins in those games, they're sitting there just maybe a game behind or even tied with Dallas going into that home game against Dallas. Yeah, so there's still a way out. I mean,
there's always a way out. I mean, this is the NFL, and what I noticed is, here's the thing, though. Good teams can't lose to teams that aren't as good as them, right? You can't play down to your opponent. So they got to come in and they got to destroy Miami. You got to go in, you got to handle your business in New York. And then you got to hope that Dallas and the other NFC East teams maybe take a tank on a game that, maybe they shouldn't.
Well, and you're a perfect person to ask this because the conversation about Dallas is all about what Jerry Jones had to say after the loss in New England yesterday and how they were not as prepared or as coached well for the circumstances of the game with the weather and how special teams comes into play. And that special teams is 100% about coaching. What do you think about that concept?
I agree. And I think it goes back to a much simpler root of this. So you get guys out of college. You get first-round picks, second, third, fourth, and you get all-stars at college that now go into the pros.
Yes.
And some of those guys aren't used to playing special teams, but really the reality is that's all they're going to do in the NFL, right? So you can't assume that these guys that are amazing athletes know how to play special teams and know how to put their bodies in positions to be successful in open space. So what I've learned is that the great coaches that I've been able to play for simplify it, and they teach very simple fundamentals. Like, for instance, you get a linebacker that's a stud in college, and all of a sudden he's blocking a guy in the front row on kickoff return. That is a completely different world.
I bet.
Completely.
They're a 6th-round selection coming off of being a big man on campus.
Yeah, and now they're asked to do something that they've never done, and you can't assume that their athleticism is going to get them there. So what I've noticed is coaches that keep special teams extremely simple, coaches that teach hardcore fundamentals in technique in the special teams game, those are the coaches that I've had success with. Those are the coaches that I've seen have success.
So who was your special team coach?
Dude, I had a lot. Danny Smith, John Harbaugh. I had Bobby April was a guy that would go just to the fundamentals. Now, we're going back 10, 15 years,
But
right?
John Harbaugh, that's right. He was the Eagles special teams coach, got a chance with the Ravens. Now look at him.
And he's destroying it. And what I liked about Harbaugh is he was tough. I mean, he literally, the harder he was on you, the more you realized the more he cared about you and the more he thought you needed to succeed for you. If he ignored you, that's when you're like, okay, like he doesn't think you're going to hack it. So when he was hard on me and when he was hard on the guys around me, you got to internalize that, take it as constructive criticism, and realize that the harder these coaches are on you, it's because they expect a lot out of you because they see it within you. You got to find it and deliver that.
So who are the toughest players to coach up on special teams? The big men on campus, I'm going to give you 2 choices. The big men on campus who are drafted later than they ever dreamt that they would be drafted. They thought they were a big man on campus, and it's tough to have them do it. Or somebody who scams their way into being a long snapper through the magic of video editing.
Interesting.
Like you, John. Who's
yeah,
the
I was going to say,
one?
I'm trying to like recall who I can relate to that scenario, you know?
Because you kind of scammed your way.
Well, look, I didn't
or is that your first magic trick?
Yeah, I didn't Lori Loughlin this thing, okay? Because I had some, had some ability, right?
Yes, okay.
So my thing was this: I was a long snapper in high school, and then I went to a junior college. They were 0-4. We went 0-40, right? So the longest losing streak in college football. Not a lot of coaches recruiting an 0-40 school. So I needed tape. So I put my highlight tape together. I had a dude named Nick Highland. We rotated. Look, we're both white guys. Who knew the difference? There's no HD, no internet. So I took his crushing hits and I threw just some of them on my highlight tape. Now it's great. Then we had this guy, Tim Thurman, better snapper then than I probably ever was. And I borrowed some of his snapping tape. And I knew I could do it because I did it years prior and I had some, but you know, it is what it is. So the bottom line is I sent it out. I just needed opportunity, right? So let's relate these two characters. You got the first round big fish, and then you got a guy like me. You know, I was fortunate to play with a dude named London Fletcher, who is
never missed a snap.
One of the greatest players ever. And I will never forget, we're in a special teams meeting. Special teams aren't going real well. And our kickoff return, now this is back in the day when you can set the old school wedge where 5 guys would link arms. And it was just concussion city.
Yeah, I know. It's like insane. Braveheart meeting in the middle of the field.
It was.
I know. That's why they stopped it.
Do you remember a fullback named Sam Gash?
Of course.
Okay, so it's him and Sam Gash.
How can you forget a fullback named Gash?
Right, exactly.
How could you possibly forget that?
And all he would do is he'd look at you and go, hey, big man. You feel like hitting today? I'd be like, nope. No, I don't, Sam. Not at all. And so here's what happens. Like, we're a couple games into the season. Now, here's 2 studs. 2 established superstars on your team.
Right.
They walk into our special teams meeting. The 2 guys that would set the wedge, they said, you guys are out. We're setting this thing. You know, because you guys aren't getting the job done. So these guys walk in. All of a sudden, these are the guys that aren't playing special teams, the superstars that are, you know, they're not doing the dirty work. They come in, they volunteer for the job. They set the wedge. Terrence McGee takes it 100 yards for a touchdown. Sam Gash knocks a dude out. I'll never forget. He looks to the sideline, and it plays, you know, still going on. He hits the guy falls, and he just looks at the sideline and goes, trainer, big dude down. He don't want to hit, you know? London Fletcher hits 2-3 guys and keeps going. So I was fortunate to be around teams and teammates that they did whatever they had to do.
Right.
And that starts from the top. When you got superstars like London Fletcher setting the tone that there is no job too big or too small. But he's kind of in between what I was, right? He was a small school guy. Was London drafted?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Off the top of my head, we're.
I don't think so.
No, I mean,
free agent.
Because I think his name comes up a lot with.
One of the greatest
Rod
players ever.
Smith also, about in terms of best players that were undrafted. Rod Smith of the Denver Broncos is a guy who's
we need to start, you know, incorporating some long snappers
and
in that
John
conversation.
Dorenbos,
you know, some kickers, some punter, you know, snappers.
Undrafted free agent of 2003.
That's
John
it, baby.
Dorenbos, everybody. Right here on the Rich Eisen Show. And, you know, that's the neat part about you. It's why I love having you on, John, is that football's just a small part of your story. As a matter of fact, it's just a platform that's allowed you to have the success that you're having, as well as the stories that you are sharing and the way that you share them, again, through a book called Life is Magic, My Inspiring Journey from Tragedy to Self-Discovery. I know a format like this with, you know, a 5 or 6 minute window is not enough to explain, but I guess let's start with why you decided to write this. What's the inspiration about this?
A lot of people were hitting me up saying, you got to write a book to help people. And I finally realized what my journey was about. And moments before my daughter was born, which this was just like 6 months ago, I realized it was time for me to sit down with my dad. My dad murdered my mom when I was 12. I went into a temporary foster situation for a year before my Aunt Susan adopted me, intense therapy. And my life's been about trying to find happiness and trying to find forgiveness for me. And for a long time, I thought forgiveness was about winning and losing. I thought it meant that, hey, 1 up, we're good, score is even, I agree with what you did, and we can still be buddies. And then before my daughter was born, I realized that I need to find motivation in the worst thing that ever happened to me to motivate change, to become a better father and a better husband than I even thought I could. So I went and I sat down with my dad for the first time in 26 years.
No kidding.
Had lunch with him.
Where?
Up in Washington State.
Is that where he
yeah, that's where he lives.
He's out of
Yeah, so he's been out longer than he was in. So in Washington at the time, second-degree murder, max penalty was 13 years. So he was sentenced to 13, second-degree murder, served 11. So he'd been out longer than he was in. And for me, what I realized is forgiveness, I just redefined what it means. It means coming to terms with my reality, coming to terms with my peace, and getting rid of hate and clutter, and having somebody that's no longer in my life have any effect on my life whatsoever. So I didn't need validation. I didn't need answers. I didn't need stories or excuses. In fact, it was nothing to do with him. So I went and I sat down with him to look at him and to feel that entire time of my life all over again, to realize what the relationship of a father-son should be and could have been, and take all that negativity and realized that that's the exact opposite of what I'm going to be for my daughter.
Wow.
And I wrote about it. And so for me, having lunch with my dad is symbolic of a relationship that was betrayal and hurt, and turning that into motivation. And so the dedication in the book, it says to my baby girl, Maya, may you always have lunch with your daddy. And that's means far more than just sitting down and having lunch.
Damn straight.
Yeah. And as you know, you have a daughter, and we were just talking about it. It changed my life. And I don't ever want to even remember my life before my little girl and before I met my wife. And it's the ultimate joy. It's true. People without kids feel bad for people with kids. And then people with kids feel bad for people without kids, because there's a joy and a love that you just can't explain. And as you know, your little girl, you were talking about the Monday Night Football and just sitting watching.
Yeah, and she's writing a note and makes me complicit in writing a note about how I stink. But no, I mean, but the bond, obviously, between parent and child is something that is usually unshakable, unbreakable. What is your relationship with your dad now? Do you have one at all?
No, you know, because I realized that journey for me to go see him wasn't about that.
Okay.
It was about me finding peace and me finding motivation to be a better dad. And the reason I went to go see him was to relive that. And, you know, part was curiosity. And I'd been thinking about seeing him for a long time, but there was nothing in my life that actually stemmed action. And then it was weeks before my daughter was born, I looked at my wife and said, it's time.
Got to do it.
I got to do it. Now's the time.
And what'd your wife say?
She was all for it. And she's like, hey, I support you. And do you want me there? And I said, this is something I just want to do alone. And partly because I wanted a few days just to process. And it took months. Like literally, I had a new emotion all day, every day for months about what that was and what that meant. And it was intense. So I write about it in the book. And what's really cool is when I reflect on it, it's things I learned in sports and family, and how I prepared to go meet my dad, ironically, was the disciplines I learned throughout all my coaches, and how to stay on track, and how to achieve something, and how to have discipline and process. And I literally treated it like a game plan, which I know sounds corny.
No, I mean, but
it worked.
Well, it's a way that you've I guess handled your business for most of your life. So sometimes you go with what you know, and that also means about emotions too, man.
Oh yeah,
you know, and that's why it's so tough to go in a different direction.
Yeah, and I realized that I read a quote that if it's not, if it's easy, you ain't growing. And so I wanted to take the road less traveled. We know people that wanted to meet their fathers or mothers that were estranged, and then they either passed away or they just never did, right? And so I wanted to take the road less traveled, and I didn't think I'd have any regrets doing it. I knew it would be hard and emotional, and it was. And it was super intense. But, hey, if it's easy, you're not growing. So take the hard road and find happiness, whatever you got to do.
And if there's anybody who's hearing this or watching this, that this sounds similar to something you've been through, or know somebody, or it's any way, shape, or form can be used to help out your life, Life is Magic, my inspiring journey from tragedy to self-discovery. John Dorenbos, and there you go, with a deck of cards on the cover. Where can people see you perform?
Go to johndorenbos.com. I just finished a little tour that we had, and now we're kind of planning the next one. So my website's got everything at John Dorenbos on social. And hey, life is magic, and it's what you make of it. It's the words you tell yourself. So be careful what you tell yourself. Be careful where you're going. And I hope everybody can find closure in their life and find forgiveness and peace and rock on.
And there's Ellen DeGeneres with a quote on the front.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. I mean, they ended up calling me and say, hey, I don't know if she's ever done that before. So when she did that, it meant a lot, and it was super cool.
Hey, not everybody can get quotes on the back of their book from Ellen DeGeneres, Garth Brooks, and Andy Reid.
Really cool.
That's quite the triple play you got there,
and
man.
for me, Andy Reid has been I still talk to him. I love him more than anything. He was such a great coach. I was a big fan of Garth Brooks, and we became friends, which is insane to even think about. And so, when these people are like, hey, I'd love to be a part of this, you just kind of step back and go, whoa, like I was a kid shuffling cards, back when I was 12 years old, and now you're able to collaborate with some of the greatest people in the world. It's really cool.
Congrats, John.
Thanks.
This place is welcome to you anytime. Your 10 of spades is in the front hall of the Callaway corner.
You know what? If I write another book, I'm going to call you out right now.
Okay.
I want a quote from Rich Eisen on the back.
John, you don't.
Done.
It's absolutely done.
You're hearing it first right here. So now I got to write another book.
I'm assuming this is going to be a paperback version.
Yeah. Well, we can add one.
That's what I'm saying.
Ooh, baby.
I'm there for you.
Email that over. Come on, baby.
Move over, Ellen, Andy, and Garth. I've got something pithy to say for John Dorenbos' paperback version of Life is Magic. You can follow John on both Twitter and Instagram at John Dorenbos. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, guys.
Love it whenever you come on, John.
Thanks.
Really. Booger McFarland still to come. Your phone calls as well. Don't go anywhere. We're back on the Rich Eisen Show in just a hot minute.
For more of the Rich Eisen Show, tune to Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV for free on BR Live or download the Rich Eisen Show app.